She defied a general. 30 days to test hope. What happened at 600? The training field simmered under a noon sun, grass clipped close and smelling sweet as it warmed. Cadence calls thudded like distant drums, then faltered as eyes tilted toward the unlikely to blow at the edge of the drills. A young private knelt in the grass with her hands tight on the buckles of a knee brace, steady as a surgeon, steady as an anchor. Private Carter, step aside. He doesn't need help. She didn't move. Nyla Carter kept the straps taut, fingers sure, shoulder bearing her balance. A ripple passed across the field. Whispers, the hush of shock. General Allan Strickland watched from his wheelchair, rigid in a dark navy dress uniform that fit him like a suit of memory, silver hair neat, jaw set, hands resting on his thighs. The chair had been part of his outline for 15 years, the end of a convoy and the beginning of steel wheels and polished politeness, of pain managed and hope quietly folded into a drawer. He had learned to command gravity differently. He had not learned to forget. Nyla's voice barely rose above the breeze. I reviewed your files, she said quietly, adjusting the side strap with care. Your scans, the scar tissue, the surgeries. You had no clearance to do that, the general said flatly. I had need, she replied. Heads turned. Some faces hardened, others softened. Nyla was young, mid-20s, slim, her black hair pulled tight under her cap. Camel fatigues still too new, boots too clean, no stripes, no insignia to speak for her, and yet her gaze did not blink. The general narrowed his eyes. You think I haven't been examined by the best? Sir, she said evenly, sometimes the best get tired of trying. I haven't. He let the words sit between them like a test and watched them not unsettle her. You're out of line, soldier. Her hands did not lift from the brace. With respect, sir, your gluteus and quad muscle groups have residual activity. Minimal, yes, but measurable. Your lower motor neurons still fire. That means there's a pathway. Weak, but alive. For the first time in many years, something like surprise crossed his face. A blink against sunlight and an old ache. Possibility had been a word no one used around him anymore. It sounded reckless. It sounded like the past. You've built a life around the chair. I get it. You've led from it, commanded from it, earned medals from it. But sir, she paused, tightening the final strap, you haven't finished what your body wants to do. Silence stretched, long enough for the sound of push-ups and barked orders to slip back into blue air and then thin. Strickland felt heat rise in his chest, not anger alone, something with edges he hadn't let cut him in years. You think I haven't tried to stand? I think you haven't tried again. Not since the last time someone told you to stop hoping. She met his eyes then, steady as stone. That someone wasn't me. You presume a lot for a private. She stood, not in challenge, but in conviction. I was a neuro-rehab tech before enlisting. My unit specialized in retraining damaged systems. I've seen limbs move after years of silence. I've seen spines respond after every scan said no. And you think my spine is going to obey you? He said dryly. I think your mind already has. She said, your body's waiting for permission. The words did not flatter. They did not need to. They reached a part of him he had boarded up with discipline and decorated with rank. For an instant, he remembered wanting to stand simply to feel his own weight return to him, not for ceremony, not for command. She looked down at the brace. We can try static stand therapy with parallel bars, 30 seconds a day, just pressure bearing. Then we'll see. He looked away toward the gym buildings at the far end of the field, toward a door he hadn't opened in years. You don't know what it feels like to fall in front of a room of soldiers who once saluted you. I do, she said, her voice lower now. Not physically, but I know what it feels like to be looked through, to be told not to bother. I've been dismissed my whole life. He turned back slowly, the sky audibly high, the air suddenly thin. She nodded toward the gym. Give me 30 days. If I fail, you'll never hear from me again. Everything in him wanted to protect the last intact portion of himself, that small shelter he'd built from competence. But the floor under that shelter shifted. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. Instead, with the field watching in a silence that felt like breath held, he nodded just once. Nyla picked up her bag and walked away. It wasn't applause that followed her, but the kind of quiet that gathers at the edge of a first step. The next morning, just after 600, The base gym's rehabilitation wing creaked awake to the squeak of rubber on linoleum. Strickland wheeled himself through a door that still knew the route of his hands. Dust floated like a slow snowfall in beams of old fluorescent light. He had avoided this room for 15 years. The air still kept his name. No one greeted him, not from disrespect, but because no one expected him, except one. Private First Class Nyla Carter stood with sleeves rolled, forearms clean of dust because the bars weren't. She had already wiped them. Tension cords lay coiled and ready, neat as discipline. Her expression was focused, a narrow beam of attention that did not demand anything before it offered steadiness. She did not salute when he entered. He had told her not to. "Braces are warm and ready," she said, nodding toward the padded parallel bars. 30 seconds. That's all we aim for today." He said nothing. He rolled forward and locked the wheels with the muscle memory of 1,000 arrivals and endings. Nyla moved in, clinical, precise. She wrapped his thighs and calves in stabilizers that hugged like firm hands. The straps kissed skin, cool then tight. Her focus did not waver. "Tell me if anything feels wrong," she said. "It already does," he muttered. He let her help anyway. Her arm found the small of his back, sturdy where he was not. The braces cradled both knees with an insistence that felt like an argument. He took the bars, metal biting his palms. The room seemed to narrow to the span between those grips. "All right," she whispered. "Now bear weight. Just shift." He pulled breath in through his teeth. Everything inside him braced for the humiliation he remembered. The sag and the drop, the betrayal. Pain flashed like old lightning, like a storm he'd survived and never forgiven. Still, he pushed. His feet stayed planted. His knees, once faithless, held. Time slowed to the body's thin measure. 10 seconds. 20. She didn't count aloud, didn't cheer, just breathed with him, a quiet metronome he could match. At 30 seconds, she leaned closer. "Now sit, sir." He folded back into the chair and felt sweat on his brow, damp under his collar, a slickness that came not from motion, but from the strain of unlocking a door he had kept bolted with dread. Nyla knelt to face him, her hands already easing straps. "You did it," he stared at his legs. "I didn't move." "You stood. You bore your own weight," she said, gently tugging off the straps. Your body remembered. They returned the next day and the next. Some mornings the pain had edges sharpened overnight. Some nights he didn't sleep at all, and the daylight felt like a dare. Sometimes curses slipped loose, low and private. Nyla didn't react to them any more than to the sweat on his temples. She handed him a towel and the same steadiness. 30 seconds lengthened, shyly at first, then with a kind of stubbornness he recognized as kin to his own. 1 minute, 2. By the third week, his hands no longer rattled on the bars. He found the micro shifts himself, forward, back, hips aligning like a map relearned. On day 21, Nyla stood a fraction farther away. He felt the space like a cliff and realized he wasn't falling. He stabilized without her touch. That night, he faced a mirror without the habit of avoiding it. His shoulders had drawn new lines, sharp where they used to slouch. But it was his eyes that startled him. They carried light again, the kind that came without performance. By the fourth week, they stopped counting seconds. They started counting steps. The first 2 were awkward. Braces loud, each foot a heavy thought placed on the floor. 4, 6. Desperation softened into focus. One morning, Nyla opened the gym, door to find the braces already strapped and buckled, the bars left behind. Strickland stood at the edge of them, waiting, hands not on the metal but folded on his cane. She blinked at the picture he made. Impossible not because of the physics, but because of the man he had been yesterday. He lifted his head without smiling. "You're late, Private?" "Sir, I've been here just watching." That day, he took 10 steps between the bars. The gym staff, once indifferent, glanced up one by one and found themselves held by an old gravitational pull. Someone clapped. Someone else did, too. Word traveled faster than routine. By month's end, the field gathered under a mild sky, the same patch of grass that had pressed cool against Nyla's knee. Most assumed it would be a promotion pinning, the usual choreography. Instead, the crowd quieted as Strickland wheeled to the front and locked his wheels. He set his cane on the grass, not to lean, but to mark a place. With effort visible, breath audible, he stood, no bars, no cords, only a cane and her hand. He took one full step forward, turned toward the men, and saluted. Silence fell like a curtain and then tore open. The cheers carried a different frequency than celebration. They sounded like relief, like gratitude, like being forgiven for having stopped believing. Some soldiers cried without disguise. Others shouted his name in loud, rough voices. He found only one face in the sound, Nyla's. He stepped toward her, handed over the cane, and stood tall, shaky, yes, but upright in a way that had nothing to do with spine. "You didn't just help me stand," he said. "You reminded me who I was before the chair." She nodded, eyes bright, voice steady. "He was always still there, sir. Just needed permission." He reached inside his jacket and drew out a small medal, not the showy kind. "Civilians don't know this one," he said. "But it's earned by soldiers who restore something broken." He pinned it to her chest, hands unsteady for reasons that had nothing to do with muscle. "Not my body," he added, voice shaking, "but my will." She swallowed the heat behind her eyes and kept her words clean. "I didn't come to fix you. I came to remind you weren't finished." They stood, commander and private, rank meaningless beside the proof of a choice made and remade, as the field behind them straightened with them, each spine aligning to a new possibility because they had witnessed the impossible. Not a man walking again, but a man choosing to.